to a point where we can have a bunch of questions and work on that, and then we'll keep going.
Sounds great. At this point, I think the fluctuation has stopped, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, SOAR students, LaGuardia students. I see a few faculty members here, a few staff members from CCPD and from LaGuardia. As a majority of you may know, my name is Jacqueline Nava, and I work in the Center for Career and Professional Development as the Work-Based Learning Manager. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, President Kenneth Adams, who is going to share his knowledge on networking and, of course, other tips that will make an impact during all of our students' career search. President Adams has led the college's effort to improve student success and strengthen its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion since 2020. So without further ado, President Adams, thank you so much for being here. I will pass on the virtual microphone your way.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you again to Jessica and to the whole team in CCPD. I think most of you know this, but I want to repeat it. LaGuardia, has the biggest, most kind of best prepared, highest level team of career services professionals in CUNY. So you're all very lucky, or we're all lucky to have Jessica, Jacqueline, and their colleagues. And it was their thinking entirely 100% that led to the launch of SOAR, this really important initiative that's part of our broader commitment to make sure students at LaGuardia get really meaningful and paid internships to support them in their educational journeys, whatever their various pathways are. And I work, as Jessica knows, with our foundation to raise money, to have stipends for those internships. We have a board meeting coming up, and there's just a lot of interest in the SOAR initiative. And I think a lot of interest in continuing to raise funds to make sure there always be stipends for internships. And frankly, over time, Jessica knows, my hope is that we can really guarantee a meaningful paid internship to any LaGuardia student, every LaGuardia student that wants one. And I read today, I think, Jessica, I got your invitation. There's a graduation or a celebration of SOAR on June 9th, I believe it is, right around the end of the semester. I hope all of you that are in SOAR will participate, and everybody else show up, Jessica. It'll be a lot of fun. So this is about networking, and something that in the over my career has been a very helpful practice. I have to say, I don't think I ever was a strategic networker. I don't think I thought about it that much earlier on in my career, about the value of building a network and maintaining a network. But as I progressed in my career, I realized that I was able to advance, get different jobs, have important professional relationships, because I was very fortunate. I had over time developed a bunch of relationships that became a network. And if you think about networks, we have different kind of networks in our lives. And what I'm talking about this afternoon is really, I'm going to call it a professional network. Networking for the purposes of, your career development and your career growth. But let's be clear, we all have networks of friends and family. We may have networks that are based around an interest. We could have networks of people where we have something in common. We could have a network based on being a spiritual community, a faith-based community. Maybe it's a sports thing. I mean, you have a lot of different networks in our lives. But in general, what I think, and I'm just going to quote, there was an article I liked a bunch of years ago in Inc. magazine about professional networking that says making connections and maintaining relationships with people who support you throughout your career can be key to success for most individuals. And the fundamentals of that statement, professional networking, is it's making relationships, but also maintaining them. So it's not enough to meet people that can be helpful, but it's staying in touch with them in a positive relationship over a period of time. You never know when you might need their help and they might need your help. Goes in both directions. But the thing is, over the course of our careers, the more relationships that we develop, the more we put the energy, the time, it takes work, right, into maintaining those relationships, which often are, our friendships. Then over time, there are more people we can turn to when we need help. Another way to think of it is, who's your fan club? For your career, you want to have a fan club. You want to have people, and maybe it's just a handful of people when you start, that would write a letter of reference for you. Maybe they would take a phone call from a recruiter who wants to get a little background check. Maybe they just give you good advice over a cup of coffee. Maybe that person would let you practice your elevator pitch. Maybe that person would proofread your resume. But these are people that, you trust their judgment. They want to help you, and they really think you're good at what you do. They believe in you. They know you're going to soar. They know you're going to move ahead. So again, you start out in college and maybe that fan club's 4 or 5 people. But trust me, if you over time create and maintain relationships, with people that you work with inside and outside work, inside and outside college, and they're like this growing fan club, that's this base of support that just grows, and it's there for you. And later on in your career can always be really, really helpful. Again, I like to think of it as like, who would you turn to for that letter of reference? Who would you turn to for a phone call? Who would you turn to for some advice? And I think if you think about it, you already have people in your lives like that. So what I want to talk about this afternoon is how to build even more relationships like that so that they support you moving forward. One fundamental before I get into, I'll try to do the share screen now and bring up my notes, but I want to go back to something I said a moment ago, which is networking is a two-way street. It is not, what can Jessica Perez do for me? I mean, I know she can help me with my resume and she can give me some good advice. I kind of know that, but what can I do for her? How can I help her? So many, like in life, relationships, good working relationships are a two-way street. So you're going to hear me say this in a minute, but a lot of what we're talking about here is getting to know these people that you have a chance to meet and thinking about them as much as you think about yourself, and thinking about how can I help that person? How can I help them? Because with that mentality, with that focus on helping others, you'll be surprised that becomes a glue of a relationship, and it becomes a much more balanced two-way street. Anyway, let me see if I can pull up my notes and I could focus on this a little more clearly. I think it's this thing. Can you all see that? Somebody nod up and down.
Yes.
Is it there? Is it there, Jacqueline?
Yes, we can.
Because I should have made a PowerPoint, but I didn't have time. So these are the notes. This is just a Word document, as you can tell. But it helps me go through some of these points, and then we can come back to them. And I can send this to Jacqueline. I can send it to you later if people wanted. You can make your own PowerPoint. I don't care. So just a little review of what we're going to talk about. And we're going to use a specific example, okay? So this is, you got to use your imagination. But a few weeks ago, we took a group of LaGuardia students over to the JetBlue headquarters, on the other side there, over by Queensboro Plaza. And we met with some very senior people from JetBlue. We got a tour of the facility, and they actually talked about internships and jobs at JetBlue. And, I think we had, I don't know, maybe 15 students, something like that. So what I wanted to structure this exercise this afternoon is to say, if next week you were going to go, let's say we repeated that activity and you all were going to go, and there's like 60 of you in the Zoom. So I don't know if JetBlue could see 60 people at the same time, but that's okay. Imagine that you're in a group of 15 people or dozen students, and we go, I take you over to JetBlue, meet some of my friends there, and there's going to be kind of a tour, and then some of the JetBlue employees are going to join us for a reception, maybe some sandwiches, some sodas, and there'll be like a reception where you can go up and meet them and talk to them and say, what do you do here, and introduce yourselves. So that's the event. So we're going to plan for that event. So, and because that's a networking opportunity, you're going to meet some new people that work in the tourism industry. So I'll come back to this, but overall, what we got to do here? Do your homework. We talk about that. Prepare to present yourself. Practice that elevator pitch. We're going to do that. We have to do that even though it's on Zoom. I'm going to need some volunteers. So some of you start thinking about when I turn to you in the Zoom, you're going to have to help out. Be punctual. Listen carefully to your counterpart. And by counterpart, I mean, the person at JetBlue in this reception that you kind of bump into over the coffee machine or whatever. The counterpart is the person you're talking to from the company. And by the way, this plays out. We had a group of students that went over to MetLife in Midtown the global insurance company, career development reception. We have these, we want to do more and more of these, but give you all opportunities to go to events where you can meet people in the jobs that you're interested in, or at least in the industry, in the careers that you're interested in. So this would be sort of like how to prepare for that. Or like I say, imagine you're going with me to JetBlue for a luncheon reception next Friday. So you got to listen to your counterpart, and then we have some tips that come in at the end. I try to keep this to one page. Do your homework. Let's start right here. As much as you can, doing your homework involves doing some research on the company and maybe even the industry. And you don't have to become an expert, but you want to know the context. You want to know something about like the background of the company, what the company, and JetBlue, I think we've all heard of JetBlue. And what's going on in travel and tourism right now? I mean, that's pretty easy to Google, get some interesting facts about the aviation industry. You don't have to be an expert. No one would expect you to be an expert. But when you're networking and you meet somebody, let's face it, people like it when you're interested in them. And they like it when you show an interest in them and what they do. So by doing some homework and learning a little bit about what's going on in aviation, again, you don't have to be an expert. You show you care about them and the company, right? Which is very different from saying, oh, it's nice to meet you. Tell me all about JetBlue. That shows you have done zero homework, right? So try to learn a little, get some background information, research the company. Professor Google makes this really easy. And research the industry. Always be prepared with questions. Again, you want to show interest in your counterpart, in the person that you're meeting, that you're going to develop a relationship with, and you're going to bring into your professional network. So, before you go, part of your homework is to prepare some questions, and you don't have to write them down. I mean, you could, if that helps. You're not going to pull out a piece of paper in a lunch meeting, but in your back of your mind, you might want to have, you're going to want to have some questions you can ask that shows that you care, that show that you have interest in the industry. Really important. I know you do this. I know Jessica and Jacqueline make sure that you do this. But if you can find out the name of the person you're going to be talking to, or maybe even the presenter. So let's say I'm setting up the meeting and I'm doing it through a friend of mine named Rachel Hines, who's a good friend of mine. She's got 2 or 3 friends at JetBlue, and that's how I've got to know JetBlue. And you would say, so President Adams, what's the name of the person who's going to do the presentation? And I would say it's, Mary Smith. And then you get on LinkedIn and find out everything you can about Mary Smith, because then you'll have some questions. You'll know some background. You'll never know. I always do this. When I have meetings, I always use LinkedIn to learn more about the person I'm about to meet with. I did that yesterday. I had a meeting yesterday with someone who used to work for Mayor Bloomberg in City Hall. And now he works for Bloomberg Philanthropies, and he's an expert in city planning. And it was a networking thing. A friend of mine said, you should speak to this guy, whose name is James Armstrong. And I had never met this guy in my life, but yesterday I did a Zoom with him. But before doing the Zoom, I went on LinkedIn, I looked this guy up, and I realized he lives right near me in Brooklyn, like about a few blocks away. It's a silly little personal fact, right? But halfway through the Zoom with him, it came up, and he said, oh, well, you live near me. And the next thing you know, at the end of the meeting, he said, hey, it was a short Zoom because he had to go. Why don't we meet for a cup of coffee in that neighborhood in Brooklyn? So again, that happened in part because I took the time to get some background information on this guy, Mr. Armstrong, just by looking at his LinkedIn profile. Now, by the same token, what if he had looked at me? I always assume people look up me. I check my LinkedIn account. I don't have what's it called, premium, where you can see who's looking at you. I couldn't be bothered with that. But I I want to be sure my LinkedIn profile is up to date, and there's no typos, there's no crazy stuff, because I always assume people are going to check me out, and you should too. You should too. So make sure, and you'd be surprised. Sometimes when we do these events, career development events, the organization will say, JetBlue will say, please send us a list of the students that will be coming on the tour. Because maybe they have to put your names in security, or they want to know your names, whatever. Maybe they're going to make you name badges. So we do. So they might be looking you up on LinkedIn, just Googling you. So make sure you're 100% sure that any information about you on LinkedIn, on social media is accurate, up to date, and no crazy stuff, right? Nothing embarrassing. The last point here, plan your route. But sometimes when we do these events, we just tell everybody, look, meet at the lobby of MetLife at 2:00. And everyone's coming from a different place. So what that really means, and we should probably say it this way, is be there at 1:45, be ready to go upstairs at 1 to 2, because we're not going to be late. Because when it comes to LaGuardia Community College, there's one thing I always say, we must put our best foot forward. And you as students going out at an event like this, going on an interview, anywhere, any of these places, you're representing not just, you are yourself, but you're representing LaGuardia. And I, as your president, will tell you, and I know Jessica and Jacqueline feel the same way, we must always represent 100% best foot forward. So we're going to be early and we're going to look sharp. We're going to look sharp. Prepare to present yourself. So here's an interesting question as part of the preparation. What is the impression you want to make? What do you want these nice people to JetBlue to think about you? Well, let me answer that. You want them to give you a job, right? Or an internship or whatever, or you just want to build them into your network. So be clear. You know, again, you're going to have some questions in your mind. You're going to do some research on the company so you can talk about JetBlue, you can talk about aviation, you can talk about tourism. You'll have some questions and you'll be thinking, you know, when you always have to sort of think ahead. When I walk out and the event is over and they're picking up the half-drunk cups of soda and the half-eaten chocolate chip cookies and cleaning up that cafeteria, what are they thinking about me and my fellow students from LaGuardia? What kind of impression did we make? Were we curious? Were we hungry, bright, inquisitive, caring? You know, what are the feelings those people at JetBlue are going to have if they say, well, you know, they're a nice bunch of students, kind of like the students we had from Kingsborough, Queensborough, BMCC. Well, that would be a disaster because we are so far superior to the students in those schools, right? Seriously, I'm you know, the point I'm trying to make is we want to make a really good impression and we got to think about how do we do that? Okay, now we got a little time for some participation here. An elevator pitch. Now, I know you worked on these at CCPD and elevator pitches, you know, there's different ways to think about it. If you're not familiar with it, the basic idea is on the way up to that reception and that sort of meeting at JetBlue, I think it was on the 6th floor. We took an elevator. What happens if the elevators are set up in a way that only a couple students, 2 or 3 students get in one car, 4 or 5 get in another, and you're in a small group of students, and just as the doors are closing, someone walks in with the JetBlue ID. They wear these IDs. So they very clearly walk, they walk in, the doors close, and you're stuck in an elevator with someone who works at JetBlue, which is where you come to meet them. And then, you know, you start going up in the elevator. Now, do you just say nothing, which is what all New Yorkers do in elevators? We are not like people in Florida, Texas, California, where we're friendly and we talk to strangers. No, we're brought up in New York, so we don't talk to strangers. But this person is not a stranger. Person is somebody, you have a networking moment right here. So that's the elevator pitch. What do you say in that brief encounter? I would argue for the purposes of this example, if you simply say, good morning, that's probably a good start. Hello, and let's see how they react. But chances are, if you say good morning, the person turns to you because they see that you're a little nervous and you're a college student, you come from LaGuardia, you might have an ID too. And they say, well, you know, my name is Robert and I'm here at JetBlue, but what are you guys doing here? Bingo. You have been asked to, you have an opportunity to serve it up because Robert there says, you know, I'm Robert, I work here at JetBlue. What are you doing here? And so for the purposes of this exercise, imagine saying your name, where you go to college, because he's not going to go LaGuardia, and you don't ever make anybody read your name. Even if you have a name tag, pretend you don't. You can't make someone read that. That wouldn't be polite. So your name, where you go to college, what you're majoring in is always relevant. And why the last piece is like you can see, why am I here, right? And you can say different ways to answer that. This is not exactly a pure, you know, Jessica would criticize me. This isn't a pure elevator pitch This is one designed for you're on your way into the reception, and in the lobby, in the door, in the elevator, you have a chance to introduce yourself. All right. There is, you have to, I don't believe in such thing as a permanent elevator pitch. And think of it, get 3 things you'd say about 4 things you'd say about yourself. No, you have to design the pitch for the event, for the thing that you're doing. Again, where are you? Who are the people? What's appropriate? But it's a very brief description of who you are. In some cases, what you're looking for. I'm here to do it for an interview, for an internship, and I really love aviation, or whatever else you're gonna, and a little bit of a why. So depending on the situation, you're gonna have an elevator pitch. The last point, well, there's 2 other points here. One is you got to practice this. It's kind of awkward if you're stuck in that moment and you're nervous and it doesn't come out well, right? So it's really good to practice your elevator pitch with a friend or family member and get some feedback from them about, again, it's a different, like, let's say you're actually going in for a specific job interview and there's some things you just know you've got to say about, why you want that job or why you're qualified for it. So that's a more complicated pitch, and you're going to want to write it down, work on it, and practice it and role play it, right? Rehearse it. And here's the last point in this section. If there's time for a longer conversation, so this isn't the case where, remember I said at the JetBlue event after the tour, and they do a PowerPoint about jobs at JetBlue. Then there's kind of this informal luncheon reception. Maybe it's, I say, little sandwiches, sodas, whatever. And people are hanging out. And you can go back, and that person you saw in the elevator on your way in, you see that person across the room, Robert, and you can go back up and reintroduce yourself. Now you know more because now you had the tour. At that point, you just can't say, hi, I'm Kenneth. I go to LaGuardia. I'm a film major, and I'm so glad I came to this event today because I wanted to learn more about. The guy's going to say, you just said that in the elevator an hour ago. Why are you saying that again? No, you have to have plan B. You have to have the next script. In other words, if you have a longer conversation, how about 3 things you want that person to know about you? And now assume you already told them your name and where you're in school, what your major is, and why you're there. So this is really more of the elevator pitch, right? This is more advanced. This is, well, Robert, I really, I like this tour today. And I've been thinking about changing my major to tourism and hospitality because I'm really interested in this industry. And I didn't know, until I came here, the critical role that aviation industry plays in tourism overall. And I just think, I want to learn more. I'm really interested in what you all are doing here at JetBlue. I speak, I'm trying to think of a language, but I speak French or something, right? In other words, something about you, or I play the saxophone. That's probably not so useful. But speaking a lot of languages in the tourism industry is very useful, right? And if I'm making that up, I don't speak a word of French, but I want him to know. At first in the elevator, I told him I was a film major, and now but I'm thinking of changing, and it's for real. Like, I am interested, and I might even change my major. I have these reasons for being interested in your industry, Robert. Oh, and I speak French, or whatever it is, right? I'm trying to, I want him when I leave to remember me as somebody who stood out in the crowd. I'm motivated, I care about the company. And I have some things that maybe if we added it up, I would be qualified to work there. So think about, it's always good to have that in your back pocket. If you had a chance to say 3 other things and leave an impression, what do you want to mention? And what impression are you trying to create with that individual? The rest of this is kind of basic. This is so important, being punctual, and this is important in life, but it's really important in networking situations and in whether you're going for an internship or a job. I call it Swiss time because I was once in Switzerland and I got lectured on this by the former US ambassador to Switzerland, because the Swiss, you all have heard of Swiss watches. This is not a Swiss watch. You know, it's the Swiss clocks. It's this, maybe it's a stereotype of Switzerland, but they're super punctual, and clocks and watches and all that must be part of the culture. But anyway, Swiss time is very simple. If you're early, that's in Switzerland, right? If you're early to meet a friend or to get to school or get to a job, well, that's actually on time. If you're early, you're on time. That's what's expected. If you're on time, you're late. If you're on time, if you show up at 9 o'clock for a 9 o'clock interview, you're late because you were expected to be early. On time is early. Sorry, early is on time. On time is late, and late, really late. You're done. You're done. It's like, don't even bother. So Swiss time, everybody. I heard a good explanation of this today. I said I was in Astoria earlier. We're putting together a new program to train people for jobs in film and television production. It's going to be in the ACE division. The training is going to be done by members of Local 52, lighting, grib, that kind of stuff. It's really exciting. But anyway, that's a union where, and it's a kind of work where punctuality is key, and the jobs start really early. You ever see filming here on campus or filming out in the street or at Silvercup Studio over here? What happens is like an electrician will have it's called a department. So the electrical department they'll say, you got to be at the job site at 7 o'clock. And we're going to unload a truck of all the cables and wires and lighting because we're going to do a film shoot today for Law and Order, whatever. So all the electricians really are there by 6:30 because the foreman is looking around and needs everybody there before they open the back of the truck. And he doesn't, or she doesn't want to worry about where is Kenneth, who's not here, when I'm like looking around because we're about to go. So it's just, again, just remember, I would tell you that Local 52 film and television production workers, if you show up at 7, you're late. They expect you to be there 6:30 if they say 7. All right, enough about that. I said this earlier, listening is such a big part of networking. It's a two-way street. And you've got to listen really carefully to and go back to JetBlue, go back to the sandwiches, the cookies, and the talking to this fellow, Robert. You don't just ask him a question and let him talk over your shoulder like the words are going here past your head. You're listening very carefully. You want to learn from him because you're going to want to come back with questions that show that you understand and that you care. People like it when you care about what they care about, and they notice that. And if you're faking it, they notice that too, right? It's phony. But if it's legit, because you're listening and you're coming back with a question, it shows that you're paying attention and that you care. So I like to put it this way: listen to understand, not to respond. I think in life, all of us, starting with myself, we always do better. We would do well to remember this idea: listen to understand, then not to respond immediately. You ever talk to somebody and before you finished even saying what you were saying, they kind of cut you off and they start talking right on top of you? They weren't really listening to you. They were just waiting to jump on, to interrupt you and say their thing. And that's a turnoff. We don't like that. This is this is a play. For me, it's a play on Quaker philosophy and teaching that I grew up with, the expression is seek first to understand. We would have a more peaceful world if the idea was you seek first to understand, not to respond. I flipped that a little bit for this exercise and say, just listen to understand. So listen carefully, learn about your counterpart, and then figure out, can you use what you learned later on in the conversation? Okay, this is a pause moment here because I've gone through a lot of this and I've gone through it quickly. Let me take this down and go back so I can see you all. And let's hands up, questions, comments. Let's open this up and have some fun. Let's do some networking with the president.
Yeah.
Any I'm waiting to see some hands go up, and you're not allowed. Pretend we're JetBlue and about to have some cookies and some sodas. You're not allowed to be shy. And Jacqueline, there's a lot of people in the Zoom, about 70, so I can't see all the screens. Who has a question or a comment, or even who, maybe there's something I said you think is crazy and you disagree. That's good too.
Oh,
Go ahead. Okay, here's another way to, all right. Ashish, you're up.
yes. Hi. My question would be, what advice do you have for introverts or people who are like, not comfortable with like networking with other people?
Be yourself. It's okay. This is networking. I have a number of friends who consider themselves introverts. My wife considers herself an introvert. Of course, she has to live with me, and I'm kind of an extrovert. I guess you figured out. But I'm simple. But I totally get your question. And the situations I've been in with people who are I'll just say shy, in networking situations, they can almost be more effective. Like they can be really good at networking, shy people, because they listen well. That last point I was making, people who are shy listen really well, and they pick up, they're reading the room, they're looking around, they're observing. And so then it's not how much you say, but how thoughtful you are, right? Less can be more. Less can be more, right? Because maybe that introverted person during the tour of JetBlue isn't asking a lot of questions, isn't saying much, but she's looking and absorbing. And then when it comes time, later on for the networking, she's learned something about the company that no one else in the group learned. Maybe she observed something or she talked to somebody. So so networking it's valuable for all of us. And if you think of yourself as a shy or introverted person, fear not. You can network very effectively because everything I just went through, you can do. Nowhere in there did I say, you have to go to an event, Ashish, and talk, right? Or be the loudest one, or be the front of the class and in the front row. I did not say that. Go back through what we talked about doing the homework, listening carefully, having a simple, very simple, basic thing to say about myself, my name, where I go to school, what I major in, why I'm happy to be here today. That's it. That's it. Less is more. Anybody work in a job where you're selling stuff, a sales position? I'm sure some of you, there's 70 people in the Zoom, some of you do this, right? We've all worked in sales. Effective salespeople know that selling is listening, not talking. And this is personal too, like, you sell more by listening and understanding the other person's needs. And then you can express yourself and talk about how you can address those needs. And you've just become valuable to the other person. If you're ever in a conversation with someone who comes up to you and all they want to do is tell you how great they are, and they never even stop to ask what you need, they're just doing all the talking. They're talking, not listening, and they're really not selling effectively. There's like, if you think of the stereotype of go on Northern Boulevard where the car dealerships are, and think of like the used car salesman personality, right? And the one that's the fast talking, this car's great mileage, never get a flat tire, great stereo work, talk. You don't want to talk. You don't even want to touch that car. It's like, drives you crazy. And then the next salesperson, she comes over and says, well, what kind of car are you looking for? What are you going to use it for? How many people? What kind of driving do you do? And getting you to talk. You're the customer, right? She's making you talk. you'll end up buying the car from her. So, I mean, I just want to be really clear. All of these lessons about networking work equally well, in some cases better, for introverted people, for shy people. Just think about these fundamentals. I have another question for you. Who has something? Well, no, let's go to Nicolas Urena. Nicholas, where are you? On my screen somewhere. Hello.
Hi, Kenneth. How you doing?
Great.
No, I was just gonna add on to something that you had said, that even though shy people, they may be not very eager to go pursue networking. I think of it more in the sense that it'd be counterproductive to not go network, or you like more so, are you gonna let it stop you from achieving goals of yours or speaking with people that can benefit you later in life? Just to add on and reaffirm that.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicholas. I'm based on what you just said. A follow-on question for me is anything that I've said so far that anyone's like had an experience like that. Like, help me, like validate. Has anything I said resonated with you, where you're like, yeah, I had an experience where that happened to me, or where that would have been useful? You know what I mean? Like, of the different tips or pointers, anything, is that what stands out? You know what I mean? What stands out of what I've said so far? Kathleen?
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I worked in retail for 3 years. And my biggest sales, I could remember that it was people that they came into the store, and I was 100% just more focused on what they need, how they feeling that day, what they are buying for, shopping for, and just more focused on them, instead of just throwing all the best products we have right away, like not speaking too much, not speaking too soon. And it was like one of the best, was most of the best sales and biggest sales was people that I got to know them before we started talking about the products we have. So you build sort of a connection with the customer, and then they're going to be more willing to listen to you and take your advice for what you probably think is best for them, sort of thing. So
Yep.
Listening is very important.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathleen. That's 100% spot on. I think I saw another hand up a minute ago. Anybody else with what's something we've talked about that resonates, that you're like, yeah, that makes sense, or I've had that experience? Anthony.
Yeah, President Adams, you mentioned like just continuing the conversation with regards to those that may be a little bit shyer in the social settings. One thing that I was told with regards to active listening is also asking questions, which prompts the conversation, and you're not the one speaking so much. What are some questions maybe you think could be like your go-to in these settings when networking with people?
That's a great question. I'm going to think about that. I think we do have to think about the context, about like what the setting is. And I've been using, just because it was in my mind, this example of if a bunch of us were over at JetBlue, and we had a chance to mix and mingle and meet some people and do some networking. Let's go back to this fellow we had met in the elevator, Robert, and now we see him, getting a bottle of water or something, and we can go over and say hi again. You're right, Anthony. It's good to have some follow-up questions now, because we want to kind of take the conversation to the next level. And, one thing I would think about asking is, Robert, if you don't mind my asking, how long have you worked here? And, how did you start out at JetBlue? Trying to get him to talk about himself a little bit in his career. And then as he starts to talk about that, you could back up and, where did you go to college? Or, where are you from? Or, how long have you worked at the company? What's something, Robert, what do you like about working here? Like, it seems like a really cool place, but like, why do you like working here? I'm trying to get Robert to talk about his experience. I do care, like I'm interested in the guy, so I want to get to know him a little better. And you know, it sort of depends how the vibe is going, but I might end up with, you know, Robert, I told you before I was thinking of changing my major to tourism, and you know, do you think I could like maybe follow up with you in a couple months? If I do that, could I come back and talk to you again and maybe get some advice? Right? Now I am asking for a favor a little bit, right? But I kind of, the guy seems like he's pretty friendly. He really likes his job here at JetBlue. And I'm sort of thinking, you know, I asked him about how he got here, how long he's worked here. And then, yeah, I'm asking him kind of a networking question, which is like, could I, you know, would you mind if I want to talk to you more about working in this company and working here at JetBlue? Could I maybe like, you know, do a Zoom with you in a couple of weeks? You know, he could say yes, he could say no, but he's going to know you care, right? And that you're trying to learn from him. And if he says yes, then great. You know, you follow up, you do it. And guess what? Even if you never work at JetBlue, you have someone in your network. You just increased your fan club with a guy named Robert at JetBlue. And maybe down the road, you're working for something else and you could go back to him for some advice. At this stage in my career, I still have people that I go to, you know, that I've met in prior jobs that I count on for advice, you know, and that, you know, you always, you know, you use that network for lots of different things. But Anthony, that is a fantastic question, right? What are the questions that kind of after the initial get to know you stuff, the deeper questions that could actually turn into a, you know, a relationship and maybe a friendship or certainly a professional networking relationship?
Thank you.
No, thank you, man. That's great. It's a great question. Who else? Kathleen, you coming back or is your hand still up? Okay.
No, I was intending to coming back.
And you know, I have to ask you a question. I beg your pardon, but I'm probably mispronouncing your name. How do you say your name?
No, that's correct, Kathleen.
Okay.
That was pretty good, yeah. And I apologize, my camera is not on. I'm at work right now, but I wanted to ask you. You sort of answered the question right now, but my biggest thing with like networking with people is that when we don't have a common, like a similar interest right away, I have the difficulty with like getting to know them and making that connection, because like you said, you never know where you're both going to be later in life. And this is not about like getting people to use people, but in a way, it's like you kind of want to make sure they always have, you know, different backgrounds, different people on your you know, network. But yeah, so that's my thing. Like I wanted to know, when you don't have an instant connection with that person or instant like similar interests, how do you go about not sounding like you just want them to have them around in case you need them later on in life? Because that's literally what people see networking as usually. So
Yeah, that's a judgment call, right, Kathleen? Like it's it's hard. I mean, sometimes if you don't feel that there's enough of a connection, maybe it's better just not to ask for that next step, at least at that time. Because I know what you're saying. You're like, it's sort of on the edge, like you've met them. It's kind of, you know each other. You started talking at this luncheon, this networking event, and you want to ask them if they could be helpful, but you just feel like it's kind of not there yet, right? Like it would be maybe too soon to ask because there isn't enough of a connection. I think that happens. Not every interaction is going to turn into a networking relationship. You know, I could tell you a number of times that I'll be at an event and I'll start talking to somebody and I go over there thinking, hey, this person, based on the background, the industry, whatever, somebody I want to know. And you're there a few minutes talking to the person and you're like, yeah, I don't think this is really going to work out. And you can find a nice way to say, hey, it was great talking to you. Thanks a lot. You know, I gotta go over whatever. I gotta move on. You don't say that, but you know what I'm saying? So sometimes I think just, you got to be honest. Do I feel that like I'm interested in this person? he, she, they is, seems interested in me, answering my questions. We're starting to talk. And, could I ask the person again, like, I think a good general one is this idea, if you are legitimately interested in that industry, to say, could I follow up and get some more advice from you about jobs in aviation or jobs in tourism? And they're usually going to say yes, because most people are good people and most people want to help students and other people, right? So they're usually going to say yes. And you might say, well, could we do a Zoom? And they might say, well, no, listen, let's just do a phone call, or let's meet for a cup of coffee or whatever. You have to kind of go their way. But there are going to be occasions when it just doesn't click, and it's okay. It's okay. You go to a party, you don't talk to everybody in the room, right? I mean, you network and you want to find people that could help, but it's not always going to work out, and that's okay. And so part of it is you got to do a lot of networking to build that network, right? You just can't go to one event and solve all your problems. You go to as many events as you can, and you get to know people. The other thing is, this is a little old school. I'll say it right off the top. I have business cards. Like, I still use business cards, which I know, you can tap your phone and whatnot, but I like having a business card because it's when I'm not sure, like, it's a good way to end the interaction a little bit. Like, let's say it isn't I don't feel like I can really ask this person for a favor. I don't know her well enough to say, could we talk more about tourism? But I can say, it's really nice to meet you. I'd like to give you my card. And that's a way and then she has my information. She puts my information in her contacts, maybe looks me up on LinkedIn later on, and maybe even gives me her card. If she gives me her card, business card or calling card, that's a sign that down the road I could shoot her an email. I wouldn't call her necessarily, but I could follow up. So, and if by the way, you don't have to have a job like mine to be college president to have a business card. And when I have been in my life in between jobs, I just make a calling card. I go to a paper source and get nice little card stock and make a card that says my name and my cell phone. That's it. But it's a way, like, when you're out networking, to give somebody something that's got, like, your email address, your cell phone, whatever, contact information. You can make a card that says Nicholas Urena, LaGuardia Community College, your LaGuardia email and a cell phone number. That's a card. And in a networking event, give that to somebody. And then if they're polite, they'll give you their card. And that's a sign, usually, if someone gives you their card, they are willing to follow up. You could certainly try. So I do encourage you to think about that. I see we're running. I'm going to get the hook here from Jessica because it's 3:30, but we have Margorzata Peter. Margorzata, what's your question or comment?
Yes, hello. Hi, Mr. Kenneth. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
My question is how to keep the conversation flowing at the networking event.
Good. That's a good one too. These are good. Well, I think you should always have a few questions, as we said before, that dig a little deeper and get the person to talk about what they know, what they care about. And so again, using this example of this guy I made up named Robert at JetBlue, let's say we've asked him to talk about, hey, Robert, would you mind telling me how you got the job here? And what's it like working here? What do you like about this company? What's challenging? Are there, you don't want to push for negative, so you can't say, do you hate your boss, Robert? That wouldn't work. But you can definitely sort of go for the positives. But then there's a point where you kind of got to stop, right? Because remember, we said you don't want to push it too far. And it's okay after you've asked a couple of questions. If you simply want to step back and say, Robert, I really appreciate the time you spent talking to me. It's been great getting to know you. If you don't mind, I'd like to give you my card. And if you don't mind, maybe, would you mind if I got in touch with you in a few weeks to ask you for more questions about working at JetBlue? You got to have an exit. You do have to bring it to an end. Because you don't want Robert to think, oh my goodness, this guy Kenneth, he could talk right past 3:30. He'll never stop. You know? You ever
Yeah.
been in a situation like that? It could be in a party or networking event where you're starting to walk backwards. You're starting to think, I need an excuse to get out of this conversation. This person is starting to drive me crazy. I'm going to back right out of the Zoom screen. You know what I mean? So you got to know when to end it. And if it starts to feel like forced, the minute you feel like forced, like you're kind of pushing or making it up, that other person knows it too. So you probably are. So it's probably time to say, shake the hand, thanks a lot,
Right.
Be-
So I think, like, I'm sorry. It's
Be
good to have
yourself.
like kind of exit in the end, like finish with some exit question or something.
Yeah, an exit question. I think it's nice to show gratitude. So
Okay.
rather than exit with a question, I would say, Robert, you know what? I think I'm taking up too much of your time. You've been really, really helpful. And it's been great talking to you. And I really, thank you so much for your advice.
Yes.
You know?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr.
It's
Adams.
really, it's people like it when you ask them to talk. People like to talk about themselves. So you're always up to a point asking them about, questions about their work and seeing if they might be willing to help you down the line. But then you got to say thank you. And people appreciate that too, right?
Yes.
Great.
you.
I had a series of, I think we've covered it, because at the bottom of the document, if I go back to the share, I'm going to go back to the share screen for a second so we can wrap up, because I've already kind of gone over time here. Let me see where this thing is. Can you see it there? Yeah. So I'm scrolling down about, oh, thank you. And looking at the bottom, these are some summing up points, and we've said them already, right? Be yourself, right? Just be yourself. Be honest. You don't brag, don't exaggerate, like just be who you are. And don't talk too much. Don't do what I've done for the last 45 minutes. I just talk too much. Because you're going to listen and you're going to talk and ask questions strategically, and ask questions because you care, not because you're trying to prolong the conversation. But, ask questions because you care. You're curious. People like people who are curious, right? And try to get at this. What does your counterpart need? What, this guy, Robert, and maybe you think, well, what could I do to help Robert? But you might say, Robert, LaGuardia is, we're just about 5 blocks away over there on Thompson Avenue. I don't know, but is there anything LaGuardia could do to help JetBlue? Offer to help, offer to, how can we help you? How can I help you? That's tricky. That doesn't work in all situations, but it's a good question because it gets the other person to say, oh, Jessica she cares about me, like my needs. She's asking about me, not the typical, right? Other way around. I mentioned the business card. And if it's appropriate, obviously, if they have a card, you can always do that. I like to put my card out first. And then I don't have to say, do you have a business card? Because I'm putting mine out first. And so the other person's like, oh, a card. Hold on a second. Let me get you a card. Right. But you can also say, excuse me, could I ask you please for a business card? You could always do that. Say thank you. We've said that that's clear. And then following up in some situations, I think our example with Robert doesn't rise to this level. But if Robert had said, you know what, sure, let's do a Zoom, half an hour in about 2 weeks, and we could talk more specifically about the customer service positions in JetBlue. Okay, 2 weeks go by, we do that Zoom, and then after it's over, at the end of the Zoom, I thank him for doing it, and then what do? Then I write him a thank you note, because that was extra. He did something extra that was super nice, right, in his busy schedule. Half an hour is like talking to me about the industry. So I could write him a note, since he gave me his card, I have his email address, and I could just write him a nice note. Robert, thanks for taking the time to talk to me about customer service positions in JetBlue. I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Just a pure, simple thank you note. That is always important. And I'll be honest with you, people don't do it enough these days. And little things like that, thank you notes. When you do if you do an internship or a job, if you go for a face-to-face, send a snail mail thank you note. Again, just go to buy any little thank you note. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, anything, but it's the effort and the thoughtfulness. A handwritten note is fine. You write on a piece of paper on a card that you buy at CVS, you put an envelope, you put one of those little stamps on it. You go through something called the post office we never use anymore. And you drop that sucker in the mail and people are shocked. I tell you, I am shocked when I get a thank you note with a stamp on it and the envelope, and and it's just a nice thing to do. And it makes you, these days, that makes you stand out. So say thank you. And that is the last point I want to make. We have Libby and Nicholas, and then I got to let you go. And we have an event tonight. Today's the family night at the Center for Immigration Education and Training in C Building. And I'm going over there in a little while. Libby, you go first.
Okay, can you hear me? Because there may be
Yes.
some audio issues. Okay, good. So I'll make it quick. So I started writing in the chat box that I think it's very important to be creative when it comes to networking and not just, oh, there's a meetup for networking, so let me save it for that. For example, I network wherever I go, and it's not always conscious even. I just chat with people. I want to hear what they do and if we have common interests, and then automatically it just leads to ideas. For example, I was registered for a French language class this past winter session. Happens to be I didn't even complete that class. I had to drop it because of a job schedule conflict. However, in the beginning of the course, I set up time during office hours to chat with the professor, Professor Bumlick, because I wanted to get tips from her and just talk to her about it. And she was the one who ended up telling me about the internship, the New York State court internship that I did under the General Division of SOAR with some other students here. So I would have never, it would have probably not happened if I hadn't just reached out to her just to chat with her about French language. For example, because I'm interested in languages. And another example, speaking on the topic of languages, I go to language exchange meetups, which are social events. It's nothing official, nobody formal from academia. It's just people coming together to practice whatever languages they're working on. But it just leads to so many cool opportunities. I ended up taking a Turkish course online, sponsored by the Turkish government. And then the next summer, this was last year, I applied for the Critical Language Scholarship, and the Department of State paid me to study Turkish in Turkey for 2 months.
Wow.
So I'm just saying, the
Yeah.
bottom line is that just whatever interests you, talk to people that have the similar interests, and opportunities will just pop up.
Yeah, Libby, that's a fantastic point. And I go back to what you said at the beginning there, which is there are all sorts of opportunities. We don't always think of them as networking opportunities in a formal way, but amazing things can happen, right? When you ask questions and meet people, and Libby's example of speaking to Professor Bumlick is just perfect. So thank you for sharing that. We have Stephanie and Nicholas, and then I think we're going to have to close because it's Friday afternoon and you all got other things to do. Stephanie?
Hi, I apologize because my camera is off. I'm actually at work. I was actually with Libby at the court internship. The way that I was able to participate was because of the teams, because I'm an ASAP student, and every time they post something, I see. And as soon as they posted the opportunity, I grabbed it. I always seek to grab opportunities that I find. But I have one question. How do you get to the point where, you network, that's all good. I'm not a shy person. I network a lot. It's not a problem, but I can never get to ask them for help. How do you do that?
How do you ask
It's
for
a little
help?
bit embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's hard. And the one thing I think I tried to say this in the beginning, networking is a long-term game. It's lifelong. Seriously, like it's not instant success. It takes a long time to develop and maintain a series of relationships and to build up that Stephanie fan club. And I just want to say you can't expect instant results. And so sometimes you're getting more people into your network and you're still not sure how they can help. It's okay. Someday, trust me, someday it'll be helpful. But it comes to a point, you're right, Stephanie, where you have to feel a level of confidence in a relationship to ask for that help. And so you have to have enough of a, it's somebody that you met and you've been in contact, you've maintained a relationship, and then you ask yourself, does this gentleman, Robert at JetBlue, does he know me well enough? And do we have enough of a relationship where he would be willing to write me a letter of reference or be a reference call or give me some more career advice? And by the way, I've come back to this several times. Sometimes a next step in a relationship can be a mentoring relationship. So let's say that Kenneth is a student, and I do change my major to travel and tourism, hospitality management. And I go back to Robert, and he agrees to tell me more about careers in the field, and then more specifically, like, let's say, jobs and customer service at JetBlue. And he's willing to do that maybe a couple times in a semester, cup of coffee, whatever. He is becoming a mentor to me because he's way down the road in that career. I'm becoming more and more interested in working in that industry, maybe even at that company. And so it's shifting from simply a person in my network. He's becoming a mentor. And we all need mentors. It's always good to have people who are farther down that career path and are willing to kind of look back and help us stay on that path and move ahead on that path. So Stephanie, when that feels like that relationship is getting into that, the person's almost becoming a mentor to you, then you can be confident. There's no harm in saying, Robert, in this instance, Robert, you're not going to believe this, good news, but I got a job interview coming up with Delta. And I wonder if could we have a cup of coffee so you could help me maybe practice some questions, think about a strategy for this interview. Oh, really, Kenneth? What's the job? Well, it's customer service at a call center, in Queens or something. And so all of a sudden I felt comfortable asking him for that help. And of course, he's going to turn around and say, why would you work for Delta? You should have told me. I'll get you a job at JetBlue tomorrow. So because of the point made earlier by Libby that you just never know. You never know.
Thank you.
Nicholas, your hand is up. And then Renee, and then we really have to quit. Okay, I'm not hearing from Nicholas. I'm going to go to Renee.
Oh, wait, my bad.
Oh, no, go ahead. Okay, one last
Sorry
one.
about that.
Go for it.
So I was just going to say thank you for the presentation and sharing all this knowledge. It was very helpful and informative. So I appreciate you taking the time to do so. My last question to you would be, would we be able to access your Word document that you have all this?
Oh, absolutely.
Information
Yep.
and tips?
I'll send it to Jessica right when we're done with the Zoom, and she get it to everybody.
Perfect. That sounds great. And I think I'm done. I don't got any more questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to, appreciate that. Thank you so much. Renee?
Yeah, what would you recommend somebody to do who has no experience to put on their resume?
You have experience. Are you a student at LaGuardia?
Yeah, I'm a student.
Okay. You ever do any kind of part-time jobs?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Play any sports?
Yeah, I've done sports. Not in the school, but outside of school.
No, I'm just, you have experience. You thinking it's not a lot of, you speak any other languages? Obviously, you speak English. What else?
Yeah, Spanish.
Okay, you're bilingual in Spanish. Okay. Hobbies? Got any hobbies?
Yeah, I like to work out. That's my hobby.
So, Jessica, how come Renee doesn't have an awesome resume already?
Renee, he's our intern
Well,
right now.
I think we don't have time this afternoon, but I'm already writing his resume in my head. you
Oh,
have a
okay.
lot of experience, my friend. And look, no, I mean, you're a young guy. You only have so much, but you have enough to start a very basic resume, and you certainly have things to talk about and make yourself to be the interesting, caring, hardworking person that you are, and make that evident to someone that you see at an event. We all have experience, and it can simply start with college, high school, some special interests, some talents, language ability. Any of you that speak a language in addition to English, make sure that that is noted on your resume, and that if it can come up in a networking conversation, there are so many industries in New York City right now, from, school teachers to travel and tourism. There'll be 60 million tourists in New York City this year, at least. And so their industry, all sorts of industries are seeking workers that are bilingual in a number of languages, right? So put that on your resume. But anyway, Renee, don't worry. You might want to stop by CCPD and they'll help you write this all down.
You're in
And
good
make
hands.
it-
We'll help you out here.
All right, everybody. I think, Jessica, we should probably, I know everyone's got to go, and before we lose the audience, we should probably say thank you. So I really appreciate this opportunity, everybody. I will say that at first I was nervous because it was on Zoom, and it's hard just to talk into my laptop here in the office, but we had 70 people in the Zoom. And so I will say, I regret that we're not doing this in person, and I can't see you all in person. We could, never fit 70 people in my office here. So the technology helped us out a lot. Jacqueline, thank you to you as well. All right. So with that, let me say goodbye. Wish you all a happy weekend, a great end of the semester. And to some of you, I hope I will see you at Queens College on Wednesday, June 21st for graduation. Those of you that are graduating, I look forward to giving you your degrees, and everybody else, I'll see you around. Okay.
We appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, President Adams.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.